to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your
Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Tip Top Tim Fitch, and welcome to the Construction Big Breakfast. Today we'll be diving into some really interesting subjects, really associated with the series of articles in the Times and Sunday Times, which were having a real knock at construction over the past few weeks. And by the way, we're recording this in mid-May. Today, I'm joined today by our special podcast guest, Rob Garvey. So welcome, Rob. Welcome to the Rob podcast. Can you give our listeners a little introduction to yourself?
So a little introduction to myself. Yeah, absolutely. So today I've had a fantastic and varied career, Tim. I've worked for a number of different organisations, from clients, quantity surveyors, contractors, and for the last 10 years I've been working in academia, really trying to push some of that knowledge that I've acquired and educate some students about being sustainable in the built environment and one that serves society.
Terrific, Rob. It's great to have you on the podcast today. But of course, the first question before we get into the meat and potatoes, or for our vegan listeners, the potatoes of the podcast, what did you have for breakfast today?
Well, when you say vegan, one of the things that I've done over the last 18 months is actually become predominantly plant-based. So I've actually looked at doing things and taking some of those meats. So I'm not eating those sausages, or not any meat sausages anyway. The breakfast this morning was actually homemade granola with a little bit of yogurt, berries, bananas, all really healthy stuff. And I do believe I listened to Steve Fox, and it was exactly the same breakfast that he had. So maybe there's something in that.
Well, maybe we're setting a trend. Maybe we're setting a trend with that guy. So, of course, I'm not vegan, but today I could have been, because I'm on a rest day. You know, probably those who know, I push weight. So Tuesdays is a rest day. So I had a fairly light breakfast. I had 2 slices of sort of super wholemeal, extra seedy sourdough bread with peanut butter, plenty washed down with plenty of high quality homemade coffee. And now you'll probably see I'm drinking some kefir, which is something I've got into, which is that Turkish yogurt drink, which I quite like. And it's good for your gut.
Is it doing you good, Tim?
I believe it is. So
that's what's important.
No, that's right. And it makes a change from a bacon sandwich. You can't have that every day. Anyway, Rob, it's great to have you. And I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion. Yeah. As I said in the intro, there was a series of articles in the Times and Sunday Times a week or 2 ago, which was having a real knock at construction from a sort of completely outside perspective. And I know you read those, and it pricked you a bit, didn't it?
It did, absolutely, Tim. And I think, you know, the articles, as much as anything, are based on what's happened as a consequence, or the perception of the industry, primarily because of what's happened at Grenfell. So, you know, it is an event to me that is so significant in construction and should be absolutely indicating the way that we need to change things. So, one of the articles was really quite castigating of the industry, saying that you know their evidence, or what they had looked at the evidence, their impression was that nobody gave their best whilst on that project, and that really just hit home, because it just doesn't resonate with me about what we do, and I don't believe it's what most people do. So I think most people go to work wanting to do their best. Most people want to go and do a good job. Nobody wants to go to work and be involved in something that ends up with the consequences of Grenfell. And actually, it's been a driving force for me in what I've been teaching my students, you know, in the sense that the last thing I want is any of the students that I teach to be involved in a project like Grenfell, and absolutely nobody wants to be involved in it. So the issue, as much from there, is this is the perception that the majority of people get. They read media. this is the perception that they get, that construction isn't good enough, and they don't care, and that just doesn't resonate with me. I don't know whether it resonates with you.
Well, we've known each other a long time, Rob, and the great thing is I don't think we think exactly the same. We've got different perspectives on the same industry. I mean, I'm with you. I think most people are good. Most people want to do their best, for their employer, for the projects they're working on, for society, and that's absolutely the case. And I think my view is, Grenfell was a mega disaster as well as a tragedy. It was a disaster from the profession's point of view, because, as you said, there were failures at many levels and within different institutions. So not just the construction supply chain, there's errors, more systemic errors or problems in the industry. So but I think that the solutions to the construction sector are above and beyond the individual. Although I'm agreeing with you that getting people re-chipped a little bit is important.
No, absolutely, and I think sometimes the industry does get a lot of bad press, and it gets bad press because of the likes of Grenfell. It's a big issue. We do a lot of fantastic work, and a lot of that fantastic work often doesn't get reported. I think that you and I are both involved in Constructing Excellence, and the Constructing Excellence Awards are a fantastic vehicle to go along and just see what tremendous work happens and how good it can be when it all comes together in the right way. So that doesn't necessarily get reported. I think if we look back this time last year, there was another fantastic illustration of how great the industry can be of actually all coming together when we created the Nightingale hospitals. And again, I think there was a narrative just before that we saw China creating a hospital in something like 2 to 3 weeks, and you could hear people saying, we can't do that in this industry, in this country, we can't do it, and yet we did it. So there's something around that I think is really intriguing that we need to explore more. Why is it we can have projects like Grenfell, but similarly we can also do fantastic work like the Nightingale hospitals?
Well, yeah, that is an interesting compare and contrast, because of course the urgency where you've got alignment on an immovable time frame or urgency, and we look at the 2012 Olympics was seen as this fantastic program of work that delivered exactly what was required of it to an immovable time frame.
Well, and yeah, you're touching on stuff that will be really important that I would be teaching my students. But similarly, for every 2012 Olympics, that if we look around the world, and in the last 10 years, Brazil didn't do the World Cup on time, India didn't do the Commonwealth Games on time. So what was it we did in this country that were able to deliver that? And I think you can unpack that, and there's again plenty of good information around the legacy that is material that we can look at. But actually, I think we can possibly go back to a project that I was involved in. So I was involved in Terminal 5, and a lot of the people involved in Terminal 5 then transferred over to the Olympics. And I think they took with it some of the mindset that they had acquired from Terminal 5. And there were real significant aspects of that project that really tried to challenge the way the industry works. At the start of the project, it was said, if we do business as usual for Terminal 5, it will make BAA go bust. So, because it wouldn't be finished on time, it would be over budget, and it wouldn't be to quality. So what was it that needed to happen to transform business as usual into a project that was delivered on time and to budget, etc.? Now, you can unpick all of that, but I think a significant aspect of that was actually the culture that was pushed through, which focused on changing that mindset of business as usual to what they called exceptional performance. And I would challenge how many people out there on projects even think about doing things differently. So business as usual is, and we know, and there are plenty of evidence out there, and I read something the other day that it's only about 1% of all projects that are finished on time, on budget and to quality. So those three things, you know. So what is it? What have we got to do to re-evaluate the way that we set projects up for success, so that they're not business as usual, they're actually trying to achieve that next level of exceptional performance? And I think there was much in Terminal 5 that tried to drive those cultures to influence that, and I think the people that got involved in that were then quite significantly involved in the likes of the London 2012.
But I would compare that with Crossrail, which had all the top people involved in it, and hasn't had the outcome that everyone hoped for, but maybe not an unexpected one. I
think we've got a number of things around Crossrail that we need to understand, and I don't really want to sort of come across as if I'm bashing anything around Crossrail, but if you look at the way that it was set up, initially it wasn't set up in the same way that the London 2012 Olympics was set up. It went with one major organisation that was going to construction manage the lot, etc., and they changed that on the way through. For me, if we're talking about perception and coming back to the Times articles, you know, I took a lot of pride from watching the TV programmes about the way that Crossrail had been set up, and I'm as disappointed as anybody that it's not been delivered on time. I still think that when we go down there, we're going to be blown away by the engineering and the scale of it and how it's all been done. And you know, I've been fortunate enough to actually see some of the stations. I saw some of the stations in construction. They are awe-inspiring. So there's still plenty there that we need to do, I think. And I'm sure there will be, you know, appropriate analysis of all these projects and whatever. But from my understanding of what's happening, actually, there was a lot of good stuff that drove those cultures for improvement. But actually, the incentives for certain projects meant that they were more inclined to actually not present the best picture, and therefore the truth of what was really important didn't come out quickly enough. And I think that you know, there's much around controls that we need to look at, as are we really hearing the right picture? If we're looking at the Shard going up, yeah, and we know it's 71 floors, we can see it's 71 floors tall. When you're underground and it's all hidden, it's not so easy to see the progress. Just one other thing, the technical complexities of that project of trying to get the trains running through, it has to be 100% right. Yeah, so that we don't want to be running trains through, you know, thinking, Steve Fox mentioned last week about, would you get on a plane that isn't that might not get to the other end? Well, we don't want to get on a train that might not get to the next station. We have to make sure that that system works perfectly.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, the all of the what do you call it? The compliant assurance is in the rail industry is extremely important. Of course, with Crossrail, there's a multitude of different signalling systems that need to interact with each other. So it's complexity on complexity.
It is.
I mean, I can't really go into any too much there. I did an awful lot of work with on the Crossrail project back in around 2012, looking at some of the things we've talked about, and it was because of its complexity, particularly in the complexity of the disaggregation of the projects into the various component parts, made it even more difficult to get the collaboration going at the sort of level you really want it to. However, no doubt there'll be some interesting lessons learned, and I'm agreeing with you. Once it's open, the problems for most people in the well, so people walking down the street, they won't be walking down the street, will they? Will be forgotten because it will be a magnificent piece of engineering.
Exactly. It's a little bit like the Jubilee line going back all those years when that was being opened, or the Jubilee line extension rather, we forget about those sort of things. Now it's operational, and I think that becomes a really important point to understand and appreciate.
Right, so Rob, just moving on, you're calling yourself the mindset coach now. That's your sort of strap line. So
there's been a change over the last 6 months, Tim, and I think it's probably worthwhile just setting some context. I've gone through a number of things in my own life that have made me sort of take a step back and look at what I want to achieve. So yeah, I've put mindset coach. It's just something I'm thinking about right now, but certainly something that I see is really important. And I think that comes back to what I'm going to say is not necessarily easy for me to admit, in the sense that 6 months ago I was probably close to burnout. I was working hard. I thought I was coping, etc. And actually, I wasn't. And there was a little scare for me in my heart that sort of said, hang on, things ain't working. I'm not looking after myself properly. And I needed to, and I took a breather, fantastic support from those that are close to me and other people that really gave me a little bit of guidance on looking after me. And whether we call that well-being, whether we call it mental health, all those sort of things, there's a lot in that I think is really important. And when I say I was coping, I think, yeah, I potentially was, but I wasn't performing anywhere near my best. And I think that again becomes important. So what I would bring that back to is understanding, we're talking about mindset. I want to make this connection between mental health and mindset. It's all about the mind. And often when we talk about mental health, we talk about it in a way that it's not good. We see it as, oh, you're poor, you're not well. Well, actually, I think you've got to look at mental health in a sense, just like your physical health. It's a scale. You're either really fit or you're not fit. Yeah. Where do you want to be? How, you might not want to be world-class fit, but you might want to just be fitter. So what have you got to do? And I think mental health is much the same. We've got to look at it in the sense of what is it we've got to do to look after our mental health, emotional health, physical health, those three parts, in order to be able to live a happier and healthier life. And I constantly challenge, why doesn't the industry change? What is it that the industry does that means that, as we come back to what we've just talked about, we can deliver great projects, but we can also have projects like Grenfell. And I think there are plenty of people that in construction that have got mired into a mindset that stops them changing, stops them actually thinking differently about doing things. And I'd bring you to sort of, as an academic, I think you've got to bring some academia into this and a bit of theory, but Carol Dweck's work all around fixed mindset and growth mindsets. And I think that there's too much of the industry that has very much a fixed mindset rather than a growth mindset. And here what we're talking about is this concept that we can change. I've mentioned earlier on about the fact that everybody wants to do their best. Well, actually, I think it's not just doing your best, it's actually how can you be better today than you were yesterday, and what can you do today that is going to enable you to be better tomorrow. And I think that's just part of it. If whoever you are, whatever you're doing today, what is it that you can do today that is going to enable you to perform your best and be a little bit better tomorrow. And if we could all do that, then I think we could move some of these things forward. Your point about systemic change, absolutely, massive issues, but together we can actually start solving this if we really, really want to. And I think that partly comes from changing that mindset.
This is shock horror. I'm going to agree with you because one of the things I've noticed over my career is construction's very much although we don't talk about apprentices, when I'm talking about management rather than on the tools type apprenticeships. When somebody starts in the industry, you nowadays usually from university with a QS degree or an engineering degree or architecture even, they often get teamed up with someone who's in their early 30s, and that's their mentor. And of course, that person's handing down the ways of thinking as much as anything else. And I'm afraid that's one of the things that perpetuates this fixed mindset.
Tim, I teach full-time students and part-time students, and I see it immediately. And when I'm trying to inspire the students to think differently, too many of the part-timers sort of say we don't do it that way, and it's really frustrating that they've only been in the industry for 2 or 3 years, or maybe some of them might be a little bit longer, but they've already got this mindset that the way that it is the way that it's done, and that it can't be done differently.
And that self-perpetuates things. And my own view or belief is that for the most part, particularly the larger contractors, but you see it elsewhere, that the people who rise to the top have become expert at the way things are done currently. And why would you want to change? Because it's risky for you. What's the upside? You're well paid already. And if my own contention is that the real problem with construction, particularly big construction, is the business model doesn't work. And it doesn't really matter what you do in terms of adoption of technology, for instance, which obviously younger people are very keen on. I'm not knocking it, but that won't make any difference to the industry from a shareholder's perspective, because if it's widely adopted, it may become more efficient at delivering projects. It might be more fun to work your 3D twin, 4D, 5D twin models on your computer with all the screens around you, like I've got here, but no 3D models. But it actually won't change the economics of the industry, and it won't change a lot of the behaviours, because they are driven by the fact you've got a zero margin business.
No, absolutely.
Creativity, the energy and creativity goes into squeezing money out of your supply chain or the client.
So then we have to question what we're doing, and whether you're a contractor or not, you choose whether you want to take on that zero profit margin work. There are contractors out there that actually select the work that they want to work on, and they win 1 in 2 jobs with a reasonable profit margin. Now, they're not massive companies, but they do great jobs. They've got their own staff. There's good quality work. They've got a reputation. The model can be changed by those, and the more that potentially do that, that's better. I'm going to stray into areas which I'm fairly conscious. I'm not necessarily expert in talking about, although procurement and managing supply chains are there. I would suggest then you're coming back to this mindset at the top about how do you want to work? How do you want to do things differently? And do you actually why do you want to sort of go down a route where you don't pay people? Etc.
I'm sort of agreeing with you. I'll come at it from a different perspective, because the reason people think like that is that's the only way they believe they can make money for their employer or their shareholder. Whereas if you took a more radical approach about how do we deliver not the particular project but projects for 10% less cost, you could win any job you wanted and make 5 times the margin that everyone else does. But how much thought goes into that in reality?
Well, and that's something to be exploded. And I think we've also got to then, money's important, don't get me right, and we talk about value for money all the time and all these sort of things. But I think it's not just the commercial, it's the bigger picture. And I come back to, 4 out of 5 of your employees apparently are not very happy. So they're not giving their best. And I'm sort of proof of that in my recent previous experience. I turned up, I did a job, I did what I needed to do. There was nothing necessarily outwardly wrong with what I did, but I wasn't giving my best, and the organisation wasn't getting the best from me. Yeah. So if we're not treating people properly, or we're not looking after people, then how are organisations going to deliver their best? And I think I want to pick up on your point about digital as a point, and just highlight something really important, because obviously BIM's come in. It's supposed to be the solution that's going to really radically improve the world. I disagree. Okay, in the sense that it won't, just like you said, it won't. However, if we look at this not about digital transformation, but transformation enabled by technology, and understand how we need to use that technology, then it can drive that change. I think that if you only have to look back over time. 30 years ago, we weren't using technology really, and yet now look at us. I'm looking around me. I've got my phone, I've got my tablet, I've got my computer, all around me. Technology's all around us, and they're all connected. They're all seamlessly. It's the way of the world. It's what needs to happen. And construction absolutely has to grab hold of this to understand what that means. But the mindset is all too much. It costs too much. Yeah. Why do we need to? We don't need to change. We've already got all the information that we need. Yeah. Oh, and clients don't ask for it. It's crazy. It absolutely drives me mad, because there's plenty of examples out there, Tim, where people have actually looked at using technology that can then enable change. You're
right. Now, I'll just on that one last point, and I'll have to wrap up, because I'll get told off by Sarah, the director. In the Sunday Times this Sunday, there was what they call Lux magazine, which is full of fashion and watches and stuff like that. But it had a feature on the latest. They call them prefabricated houses. We call them off-site manufactured type property houses. They use a number of examples from around the world, and they mentioned that Amazon and Google were moving into this field principally to make lower cost housing for their own employees. Now, if that doesn't make the industry shudder, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Because there's people who aren't messed up by being told by their mentors and their mentors' mentors that we were building stuff like this in the 19th century. We don't need to change. If Amazon start deciding they're going to go into housing, I'll be a bit worried if I was in that game.
Absolutely. So change in industries happen in a number of ways. Internally, incremental change, some transformational change, or from new entrants. And the housing market absolutely could be transformed that way. The challenge with a lot of the house building, and I think Steve Fox was talking about it as well recently, is it's about the value of the land, not the value of the product that you're building on it. And in the UK, we have this issue. So again, it's a very, very complex issue. And we're talking about improving the process of the production of the house. And absolutely, that could be done. And there's plenty of lessons to learn about that. For me, one of the key things for me is what is it we need to do to actually have affordable housing for the younger generations. I've got 2 kids. I'm fearful about how they are going to, and I don't want to push them out. I want them to live independently. I want them to be doing what I was doing in my early 20s, which was living on my own, learning how to survive and, use the washing machine and all those sort of things. And I know they can do it in my house, but I want them to have their own space that they can live in and as I say, live independently.
Well, on that point where we're aligned completely, I think it's time to wrap up this very, very interesting conversation. It's been very insightful, and thank you again, Rob, for joining me today. Where can our listeners and viewers get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you've said?
So I've got my profile on LinkedIn. So if you look Rob Garvey up on LinkedIn, social media on @Rob_Garvey at Twitter. So, but LinkedIn probably is the first place. Okay. I've got it.
That's great. We'll put all that in the show notes. So if you if you want to look it up afterwards in the show notes. So wonderful. And to all of our listeners today, thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Construction Big Breakfast. We have a new episode every 2 weeks, although we might be publishing more often than that, because we're getting a bit of a backlog. So click the subscribe button and turn your notifications on so you don't miss a single episode. While you're at it, we'd appreciate a 5-star review. And if you've enjoyed this episode today, please like it and share it, as it helps us to gain more listeners. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast or looking to collaborate in other ways, visit us at www.invennt.com, and remember that's 2 N's at the end. The link's in the description. Fill out the contact form so one of our team can get in touch. So with that, see you next time. Bye.
Want to learn more about how Invennt can help your business maximize its bottom line? Head on over to www.invennt.com and get in touch with our team today. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.invennt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.